Tim, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Dion.
Great. So just give us a little bit about your background into Airtasker, but also your early days from an entrepreneurial perspective. I'm really interested to hear a bit more about your story.
Sure. So I grew up in Sydney, Australia. I went to uni at UNSW, did a marketing, tourism, and hospitality degree. So it's a Bachelor of Commerce, but with a bit of wine tasting thrown in there and things like that, which is pretty cool. I came out and I worked in investment banking for about 5 years at Macquarie. So in the real estate investment banking team, which turned into MacCap Partners. So that was a really, really great sort of formative experience. Left there and joined a modeling agency in 2009. So that's a fashion modeling agency, not a financial modeling agency.
Yep.
And got to work under a famous model scout named Ursula Hufnagel. So that was a really, really cool experience. I met a man named Peter O'Connell, who was the co-owner of the modeling agency that I was part of, called Chic. And we had the opportunity he gave me the opportunity to work on a startup with him called Amasim, which is a SIM card business that we started out the back of the modeling agency. Okay. And that sort of was my foray into starting startups and kind of seeing how it was done and sort of led to Airtasker.
Yeah, okay. And so as you go through that, were you always going to be an entrepreneur, or did you start off, I mean, if you went down that finance type starting point, but it sounds really diverse, the stuff you've done too, right? So what was, when you were younger, you're sort of in school and that sort of stuff, what were the dreams? Like, was it to run businesses or?
I don't think I ever thought about running businesses. And I think I did find myself sort of thinking about things a little bit differently, I guess. And, during high school and university, I started up a few different like hobby type businesses. So they certainly weren't about making money or anything, but during uni, for example, we really liked taking our cars to the racetrack.
Yep.
And, we couldn't afford to do that because, it was something like $300 or $400 for a day at the racetrack. So we actually decided to like pull our money together. We started a company called Circuit Club, and we decided, you know what, we're going to rent out the whole racetrack. And I think it was like $7,000 or $8,000, but we'll sell tickets to other people to come for $300.
Yeah.
Cover the cost of going to the racetrack for ourselves. So there are a few sort of, opportunities or ventures that we sort of jumped on, but they weren't really, we never sort of like made profits or dividends out of that kind of business, but it sort of unlocked opportunity. And I think I also kind of noticed that, when I was working at Macquarie, some of the like brightest, highest performing cultures, but I did notice, some of the cultures that I would take to stuff would just be like a little bit sort of like left of center for that environment. And yeah, they were just like really little things. Like I remember, it sounds so silly now. I remember I opened up the cupboard in the kitchen and there were no glasses left. And so I got there was a clean peanut butter jar.
Yeah.
And so I filled up the peanut butter jar with water. And someone came up to me, they were like flabbergasted. They were like, "What are you doing? You're drinking out the peanut butter jar." And I was like, "Yeah, it's a receptacle for water."
Yeah, it seemed pretty obvious, right?
Yeah, like, why not?
I was all out of options, and here's an obvious answer.
Exactly. So yeah, there's just like little things like that I kind of, in hindsight, I probably realized, I was probably always going to do something a little bit different.
Yeah. Okay. And so you've gone through that process, even those early stage or early days of entrepreneur type businesses, whether they succeed or fail in those, when you're sort of a student or whatever it might be, they're really important, aren't they, in terms of that grounding they give you, and just without even realizing it, you're probably just having fun and trying to do the things you're trying to do, but that's an education in itself.
Yeah, I think that one of the, like, a really good thing to do is like to start a business or a company off the back of just something that you want to exist, and not for it to be like a game where you're trying to like make money or reach this kind of score. Because when you start a business like that, you actually don't care so much about success and failure in that lens. It's more sort
Yeah.
of like, I just want this to exist, so I'm going to do this for myself.
Yeah.
And like, you're not kind of counting dollars and stuff like that. You're just
Yeah.
wanting something to be real in the world. And I think some of the best businesses start that way, because you can kind of, as a customer, kind of smell that, when
Yeah.
someone's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
doing something because they want it to exist.
It's something authentic, right? And it's something that's been brought about. Even the story you're telling about renting the whole circuit reminded me of that story of Richard Branson, the way he started Virgin Airlines, which was when they couldn't get the flight, and so he booked a private jet and basically got everybody on there, and that was how it started. It's the same sort of mentality, right? That entrepreneurial thinking.
Totally. It sounds like a different scale.
Probably a different scale. So once you've gone through the first startup, that was you exited that business, and then what brought you to Airtasker? What made you look at this and go, this is what I want the next chapter of my life to?
So actually, with Amasim, I guess the journey was that I knew Peter O'Connell. He was the chairman of Amasim, and through that opportunity, I got to be able to be in the role of assistant to the CEO and the chairman, and to see how the whole thing was kind of built up. And so, whilst I wasn't sort of like a founding partner of that business, it was a nice small exit out of that, and it was really just the experience.
Yep.
And so it was actually when I was working at Amasim that I was moving apartments. And I basically asked a friend of mine to come and help me move, because he's got a truck that he uses to do deliveries for his, what was a small business back then, has actually turned into a very big business now.
Yeah.
But he had this refrigerated truck that he would use to do his of frozen chicken chippies and chicken nuggets. And so he came in and helped me move. We put all our stuff in the back of the truck and moved. And this just kind of got us thinking, is like, isn't it kind of crazy that we ask friends and family to do all these jobs, and yet, there's all these people that are looking for other jobs? Why does this kind of occur? And what we kind of realized is that the fabric of sort of trust in the local community is actually very low. Like, even like the person who lives 4 doors up the road, for most people, that's considered a stranger. Would you really let a stranger into your house? Would you ever work with a stranger? And you're like, that's kind of crazy, right? And so we thought, how could you create a system of that local trust? And so that was the genesis for starting Airtasker. Then over a couple of years, Jono, my co-founder, and I were out in the community, and we'd start like meeting the taskers on our platform. And we would hear these like incredible stories of people saying like, oh, I used Airtasker, saved my butt because, I was made redundant. I'm using it to pay the rent. Or like,
Right.
I'm a backpacker. I'm able to stay in Australia because I'm, making some money on a side hustle. I don't have to do the fruit picking because I can use my skills on make money on Airtasker. And at the same time, the founder of Uber, Travis Kalanick, was like on stage at like a tech conference. And I remember him saying something along the lines of, yeah, if we could automate the drivers, get rid of the drivers, automate the cars, and our marketplace is better and more efficient. And that made us like hold up the mirror to ourselves and go like, it's a two-sided marketplace there, Tasker. But are we serving the taskers and creating job opportunities, or are we creating a convenience app for our customers? And although both of those things are true, we realized that the more profound impact was in actually, no, we're here for people. People have skills. And our job is like, how do we help you make money out of your skills? And so really that's been, where the business has been anchored for the past, 8-9 years as we've kind of grown, has been all around how do we create more job opportunities and help people monetize their.
Yeah, okay. That's a really interesting perspective. But my immediate thinking would have been it would be for the people that need the jobs. But what you're saying makes complete sense, because without the people who are there doing the work, and from all accounts, it's extremely varied work that comes across the platform, right? But what you're saying makes complete sense when it's articulated that way.
Yeah, we're really trying to like our, I think, unintuitive belief is that every single person has unique skills. Some of those skills are sort of like formally traditionally recognized, but some skills just aren't. But they're all unique skills. And that unique skill might be anything from, hey, I can knit a jumper, or I can make Halloween costumes really well, or I know how to fix drones when they're broken, things like this. And there is no way for you right now to access those skills or to be able to monetize those skills. And so that's what Airtasker's unique capability is and unique purpose is in the community, is like, let these unique skills be brought to the front and for people to be able to create income from them.
Yeah, okay. And was there something, Tim, when you're in the early days, when you're starting, you've got a good idea and you can see how it would work. Was there something that, as you went along, where you saw a particular example where you thought, hang on, this is going to work, this is significant, or did it just evolve over time into sort of what your vision was?
Well, I think one of the hardest things about network-based businesses, and marketplaces are very much, it's a network that needs to exist. Like Airtasker, we create the, if you want to use the analogy of infrastructure, we create the roads, but we don't drive the cars down the road. We're here to, create the forum and the space for this opportunity to exist. And so when you start a company like this, it's a really, really long play. And it's actually, can talk about this a bit later, but in the first 90 days, usually pumped full of adrenaline when you start a marketplace. You're like, hell yeah, let's go. Like, this is so exciting. The first day I've got one customer. The second day I've got 3 customers. So like, we're growing at like 300% day on day. This is really exciting. And then about 90 days in, you get into it and you're like, okay, so I think we were doing about 20 tasks a day, posted tasks a day, and maybe like 5 completed tasks a day or something. And we were making about $10 a task. So kind of like, okay, so we got revenue of $50,
But it's revenue.
Yeah, there's some revenue there, so that's good. But, we have a team of 8 people. We have an office. We're marketing this thing because we've got to tell a lot of people about this product. We've got all of these software costs. And I remember looking at the burn rate in the first 3 months, and it was something like, it was over 100K in one of the months.
Yeah, right.
That's pretty harrowing, actually, when you kind of like, okay, so we're making $1,500 a month, $50 a day, burn rate of over 100K, and you are just like, it's pretty terrifying. And so that kind of went on for probably the first 7 years of the business, chasing this kind of burn rate. And it took us like that long to get to sort of cash flow, profitability, and to prove that we had something sustainable.
Because you need that scale, right? You have to get to a certain scale.
You have to have the scale. The great thing about a marketplace is once you've got the scale, you don't have to keep, compounding those fixed costs. The downside of it is for the first 7 years, you've got these fixed costs. And so it was really actually when we had our first month of being like cash flow positive and knowing that we had a sustainable business was really only the first time that I felt you could breathe. That, actually, we've actually made something here where the costs of doing it, are, well, the money that we're making doing this exceeds the costs of actually doing it.
Yeah.
That took a really long time. So
okay. Well, that's really interesting, because often you'll hear those stories where people go, I knew this, and you can see, and presumably when you look at where the business could go and can go, you can see all that. But like you say, until you actually start to see things like a profit coming through and all those things actually start to add up, it gives you those signs that you're on the right track, which is, like you say, a long journey and it's a long play.
Yeah, and I think that the thing about Airtasker is that from a value perspective, I always knew that what we were doing was valuable. And that's what keeps you going. But the question was more about, could you consider it to be, that you've actually created something that's sort of like sustainable to the community? And I think proving that you can make a profit in doing that, or at least pay your own way to be able to do that is really important. And I think one of the really things is like, so many people will come up to me and go like, hey, I had the idea for Airtasker. It's like, it's like, yeah, lots of people have the idea, but it is really just about actually going out and doing it.
I thought about sending rockets up to space too, but that doesn't make me Elon Musk, does it? There's a big difference. So you've started the business. What year was this when you started Airtasker?
We came up with the idea in 2011, and we launched we opened the marketplace in 2012, about halfway.
Okay. So you've gone to that point. You've got a varied background from, finance and all through different areas. What was your biggest strength, you think, as a founder of a business, and how does that help you succeed as you sort of progressed in the journey?
Yeah, I would say the biggest asset, I guess, I'm not sure if you can call it a strength, but would have been like a healthy, naive optimism.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say that is because I actually think that if you really thought through that it was going to take 7 or 8 years to kind of build something that, that is sustainable and a good business and all that, you'd almost certainly convince yourself that it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
And one of the things about the marketplace that we've created is that a lot of the inputs are highly unintuitive, i.e., conventional logic does not lead you to doing things in the way that we did them. And an example of that would be, I think that if you were going to start a services marketplace, it actually makes complete sense to go, let's pick an area of the marketplace. Like let's pick a vertical, like cleaning or, trades or something like that. And then let's figure out how you verticalize that, make it really seamless and perfect, do that, and then move to the next vertical and do that one by one. And a lot of people cite, Amazon as like, yeah, start in books, then move to shoes, then move to hats, and then you become Airtasker is literally the opposite of that, which is that we said, no, we want to go infinitely horizontal because where we specialize in is all of those unique skills that don't fit into any other category. And that's actually our secret sauce. And so I do think that like the naivety of like, oh, let's just jump into this and let's figure it out as we go was probably our biggest asset because it allowed us to get started. And we just wouldn't have gotten started if we planned it all out from the beginning, I think.
But I think that's important. And the word you used at the start of that was healthy. It's a healthy, naive optimism. And I think that's a really important perspective on it, right? Because you've got to be optimistic, and the naivety is important, but that's a healthy way to go about it. Because without that, like you say, you might not ever start it. And obviously it's hard work, but the reward comes as you progress through and actually achieve the things that if you started it looking at it, you might not even try. Or you might just go, oh, that's too hard, let's find the easier option, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and I think it's like about the healthy bit is probably like in managing the risk and the bets that you kind of make within that sort of framing. So like, yeah, I think it's really good to go, hey, we got to go out and get started. And for us, we like our first round, first sort of like our formal round was 1.5 million in a seed round. And that was a lot of money back in 2012. But it was probably like an appropriate balance. Like we didn't go out and raise like $300 million or something, which would have just been like, okay, that's just kind of, you've gone into unhealthy territory of how much you're willing to, be naive and play that bet. But on the other hand, it was more than, raising 50 grand and try to hobble along, with being under resourced. So I think the healthiness probably comes in like, just getting that balance right between, really going for it, but not being, too crazy.
Yeah. Okay. And in terms of the opposite of that, the weaknesses. What would you say your biggest weakness is as a leader or in business, and how do you overcome that as you sort of progressed?
Well, I think that at the beginning, some of the naivety and healthy optimism, I think, is that I tend to really trust people early on and to believe that, everyone's got the talent, the skills, the experience to be able to get somewhere. And so I think that, one of the hardest things I had to do about 2 months into starting the company was let go of my first, the first time I had to be responsible for letting someone go or exiting someone from the team. And so I'd say one of my weaknesses early on was probably having a little bit too much optimism in, bringing people into the team and believing that they had the skills and experience to get there. And that is a really, really difficult thing to have to do early on. It's probably the hardest thing in starting a startup is probably exiting people from a team. So yeah, I'd say that, that's the flip side potentially of the optimism. And I think the way that you overcome it is that you need to be a little bit more disciplined with like roles, responsibilities, setting expectations, and being really objective about it and structured about that.
Yeah.
I think that over time, we've kind of gone from, in the beginning, we didn't put that much effort into like talent acquisition and managing, expectations. And now we put quite a lot of structure and rigor around.
Okay, so that's the big change, right? Is being more careful in your selection process and having more rigor or robust systems around how you do that, which then makes it easier on the flip side because you have less churn is probably the wrong word, but you retain people and you've got the right people earlier.
Yeah, and ideally you make less mistakes, and it's better for both the team members who get more clear expectations, as well as as of course the company as well, finding the people that meet that. I think more specifically, it would be like around making those things objective. Like, what do I need to see from this person, and then hold yourself accountable rather than just jumping into it and then like day by day you're like, oh, this person does great work, and that may be true, but what you do want to have is like a objective measure where you're like, here's what we expected. Is it meeting that bar? If it is meeting that bar, awesome. Promote them, give them more responsibility, etc. And if it's not, having the discipline to be able to take action on that too.
Yeah, okay, yeah, it makes perfect sense. In terms of the best decisions you've made, what are some examples along the way? Presumably that's something that happens every day, but are there any that really come to mind as critical decisions or especially important ones?
I think that like some of the best decisions come from, real crisis type situations. And so, I'd never waste a good crisis, I think the saying. So yeah, some of the biggest decisions we kind of made, they felt forced, but we made those decisions. A good example is, back in 2019, I remember we're kind of staring down a cash burn of about $2 million a month, which is like, holy crap, that's a lot of money. And so, with $15 million in the bank, we're like, oh my gosh, I feel like this is the time to get profitable.
Yeah.
And so, we literally went into a war room. We're like, look, we know that this business can be profitable, but we're not there yet. So what do we got to do to make it happen? And so I made some really hard decisions. Thankfully, that didn't involve, huge rounds of layoffs or anything like that, but it did involve definitely changing the culture from a culture of, growth at all costs, effectively, like whatever's valuable, whatever's going to help us grow, go do it, to picking your bets. And, I think that's really has set us up well for the current sort of macro environment where, we've sort of taken that medicine a number of years ago and built that culture of caring about cost management, caring about being sustainable as a company. So, in hindsight, that was one of the best decisions we made.
Well, yeah, like you say, especially now the way things have changed, presumably having done that so many years earlier, that's really does set you up for the future, right? Because now you've got everything in place that needs to be done to, well, not just survive, but to thrive, because everyone else is trying to get through this next, especially in tech. And you're seeing it in the States and everywhere where the last 12 months have been especially hard, and it doesn't look like it's getting easier anytime soon necessarily. So to have already done all of that lets you focus on the business, presumably, and keep on trying to.
Yeah, we should say, I think that like we did that exercise in 2019 of getting to cash flow positivity. During 2020 to 2021, there was, we did let the belt out again and go back and invest into more things. But thankfully, we did that from a place of like, we understand and we built that culture and that know-how of being tight. And so for us, this year, clearly you've got to go up when it goes up and pull back when it's necessary. But we've got that culture, we've got that know-how, and so it's not as painful for us to just pull back a little bit into this period. And I agree with you, like 2023 looks like it's going to be pretty tough, but yeah, thankfully we've most importantly know that we can do this, so we just got to do it again.
And you guys listed on the stock exchange not that long ago, right?
We listed on the ASX in 2021 March, so coming up to 2 full years of being a listed company. It's definitely got its, compared to private companies, mix of ups and downs, but genuinely there are lots of positive aspects to being a listed company as well.
Yeah, okay, and that's really interesting. Well, in terms of, what about some of the challenges that that you've seen along the way? What are some of the biggest challenges? Presumably COVID was one of them. And going from a private company to a listed company is presumably another. But are there any that really stand out as especially challenging?
Oh, look, I think COVID, it's quite interesting for us as a business. When COVID actually first hit, in sort of March of 2020 in Australia anyway, I remember myself and our chairperson, we got together and we were kind of like, oh my gosh, this could be really bad. And we actually saw our volumes drop by about 30% day on day when just hit the headlines.
Yep.
Everyone just sort of, started working from home, and it was, a pretty confronting situation. And we looked at each other and we were like, gosh, this could go to zero. Like, Airtasker, it's an in-person marketplace predominantly, or it's a local marketplace, but a lot of that means in person. And so we thought, we'd actually prepared a contingency plan. What if revenue drops, to 50, 75, 95% of our volume could be gone? What would actually happen was like really, really quite remarkable, quite inspiring actually, is that the marketplace actually started bouncing back off that. So it dropped 30%, but then started building back. And we started like looking at why is this happening? And the reason why it was happening is because people used Airtasker for different kinds of services, and taskers were really motivated to go and, fit in with what the consumer demand was. And what we realized is that it's really awesome when you're like empowering a community to do stuff, because it's not like you need to go in there and face that challenge of like adapting every single thing to, fit this new paradigm. It was actually like the community is going to figure it out using your tools.
Yeah. And okay. Yeah.
It's the best of times. It's the worst of times to be a platform, but certainly during COVID, although it was a massive challenge, our business model and our marketplace structure was like set up to address that pretty well. Other challenges I think have probably just been like growing pains in terms of like organizational, and like I'd say the biggest, challenges that we've faced is when we've kind of gone from that sort of 30-person team to the 100-person team to the 200-person team, and how you deal with, the growing pains of that.
Yeah. Okay. What about advice you've been given along the way? What's the best bit of advice you've been given?
Look, I think I would actually like kind of come back to that answer with, I think it's really important to listen to a lot of advice and get a lot of guidance. And, I've been so fortunate to have had various mentors along the way that I've been able to tap on the shoulder and learn from their experience. But I think when it comes to like receiving advice, the most important thing is that you're actually able to sort of like synthesize that and apply your own perspective and view on it. I remember in the early days, you'd ask one person, they'd go like, what you got to do is make sure you raise enough money to just like keep going and like be able to like do something really big. So like raise much money as possible so that, you don't have to keep coming back to the market and asking for more money. And then like you literally ask someone else who's really smart, and they'd be like, keep your expenses tight, just chip away, do the experiment, and then you'd ask another person and be like, I'll tell you what you should do. Don't do anything. Just sell the story. Because if you sell the story, you're actually able to raise money. If you don't, you won't be able to. As soon as you start actually embarking on the story, it's going to get harder to raise money. And so literally you're hearing from like 3 people who all have, advice, and
all smart people, presumably, that you respect their view, but it's then all contradictory.
Yeah, they're literally contradictory. So I think the main thing I would say about advice is you got to be able to apply your own lens to it.
Yeah.
Learn from people's experience, but be able to like make sense of it and not just listen to it as rote learning.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes complete sense. Okay. I've got 4 final quick fire questions. First one, business person that inspires you the most and why? Or maybe business people, might be a few.
I'm going to say, first of all, Airbnb founder Brian Chesky, I really do have a lot of respect for. I feel like runs an incredible marketplace, but most importantly, I think he's just like keeping it real, billionaire founder, massive organization, but also just kind of talks about, got rejected by 10 VCs, no, we didn't have this idea from the beginning. It only came when we became really big. And I feel like just keeping it real is really important, even as you scale as a company, and not to think that you're Steve Jobs or something as you get big.
Yep.
The other one I would say is Michael Schumacher. So
Okay.
I always aspire to like that commitment to excellence. You know, they would say that he'd be the first guy into the garage in the morning, last guy out in the evening, and he would give a crap about whether there was a bit of dust on the brakes or, you know, and
Yeah.
just that commitment to like ultimate excellence, I think is really cool.
Yeah, okay, that's a good answer. I like that. What about business books? Best business books you've ever read and why?
I went through a phase where I was reading a few books on behavioral psychology, and so I've got a trio of books, which I think was really like mind altering for me. Thinking Fast and Slow,
Yep.
Daniel Kahneman. Thinking in Bets, book by Annie Duke, which is about sort of like being able to. She's actually a pro poker player.
Right.
It's you to think about, you know, different probabilities in different bets and how to think about that.
Yeah.
And a book called Super Forecasting, which I thought was really awesome, thinking about how you think about the future. And I think one of the most important things is knowing that you don't know the future. And so you can put all the forecasts together in the world, but you're almost certainly wrong. And I think that's actually really important for startup founders, because a lot of people try to, you know, articulate the future and try, like they think if they write it all down, then that's how the future will play out. And that's just
not how it works.
not how it works.
No, that's excellent insight. What about any favorite quotes or on leadership or business or life in general?
One of the best quotes that I've heard recently, which I think is really sort of prescient in today's environment, is from Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba. And the quote is just, today is hard, tomorrow will be harder, but the day after that will be beautiful.
Yeah,
and
right.
I think that is really powerful, because I think, you know, if you're in business now, you're definitely finding, well, for the most part, finding it hard.
Yeah.
And I think next year's probably is going to be harder. And being able to push through that to, you know, things will get better in the future. They won't always be like they are today.
Yeah, it's not going to be hard forever. That's the thing. Good times come again, and that's just reality. You just got to endure what we've got to endure in the next little while. Get through it.
It's probably also a good point about when things are really good, you should probably also acknowledge, hey, this is temporary.
Yeah,
You know, I should enjoy these times because it'll go back the other way, and I should be prepared for those times and stuff as well.
yeah. I mean, like I've another similar type of thing, where it's along the lines of, you know, things are never as good as you think, and they're never as bad as you think either. You know, there's usually somewhere in the middle.
Exactly.
Well, what's next for the business? Where the next sort of 5-10 years and beyond for Airtasker and yourself, Tim?
Yeah, so we've got a really interesting phase right now where we've built our marketplace in Australia. We know how to scale a marketplace. And so in Australia, we're really focused on building in even more trust and reliability into our marketplace. And the reason why we're doing that is because what we've seen is that people are using Airtasker for more and more complex and sophisticated services. So we literally started out in sort of everyday jobs like moving boxes or doing a bit of light gardening work. And now people are using Airtasker for accountants, tax consultancy, lawyers, architects, and things like this. And so we're really focused on building in that trust and reliability into our marketplace. At the same time, we've planted a number of seedlings, which are really starting to grow into lovely trees now. In the UK, London marketplace is really starting to hit its strides, which is so exciting to see that happen outside of Australia. We're also seeing that in Los Angeles, where we are in the US. And then I think the thing that is my most sort of exciting seedling at Airtasker is nurturing repeat relationships. So when we started the company, it was very much about get your first task done through Airtasker. And, you know, we knew that people would meet up on Airtasker and then they would go off on their own, and we wish them luck because we were effectively like the dating website. We've now built in the ability for a very low cost, 1.9% is what we charge, is you can now manage your relationships through Airtasker and keep a list of contacts that you've got all those amazing taskers you've used. And so for ongoing relationships now, yeah, we charge a low fee. We're starting to see people really manage these relationships through Airtasker, which is really, really cool to see.
Yeah, okay, that's great. That's really exciting because that's something that people don't really have, right? That's important.
Totally. And everybody loves to, what we've noticed is like really cool behavioral quirk where everyone is so proud of their people. Like they're like, I got the best.
I got the best. Yep. Yep.
That's all good. You want to talk to my tree guy? Put you in touch with my tree guy. So
Yeah. That's perfect.
that's really cool to see.
Right. Well, thanks very much for coming on the show, Tim. It's been really, really good to hear about your journey and that of Airtasker, and wish you well in the future.
Dion, thanks for having me.
Thanks very much, mate. Appreciate it. Marcel, you can stop recording there. Thanks, Tim. That was great. Really good. Really
Awesome.
good.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
No, that's great. I remember hearing about Airtasker in the early days. One of the things that taught me that I was no good at VC or anything like that and should stick to investment of stocks, and that's it, was I remember hearing, and I think you might have even talked to us about Airtasker going back 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I thought, gee, that's really hard. And I saw a few different startups. Well, we saw lots of them back then because we thought this might be something that we can get into. But every time I saw something, I thought, oh, no, that doesn't, I can't see that working, can't see that. But actually, some of them did. And Airtasker was one of those companies that went on and did great things. And it just showed me that what you look at something and you sort of think, oh, I don't know if that works. You can never, and you've really got to actually understand, and I didn't know enough about VC at the time, but good founders, great founders will overcome those issues. And I never understood that because I was looking from a listed company, big business perspective, and that have already made their mark, not ones that are sort of solving a problem and trying to work out how to solve it. And one of the things I learned from that, which is why I don't do anything in VC, because I don't get that part of it, but is that great founders will overcome any of those issues that you look at from a logical perspective and think, oh, that looks too hard, or I don't know how that would actually end up working. So you sort of, from my perspective, I was ruling these things out as too high risk. But actually, out of those companies that we looked at and talked to, there were several of them that ended up becoming quite successful. And Airtasker was one of them. I used to look back and go, wow, Tim's really done that. That's really cool. But it just shows you, some of those people that look at those things don't understand what you might understand or what your abilities are. Do you know what I
mean? In fairness, you're right 95% of the time.
Yeah, that's probably true. But the problem was I was ruling out every single startup, so there was never anything for me to invest in. I thought, I'm not very good at this. I've got to stick to stocks.
That's why it's got to be like a broad, portfolio. But even for the guys who are good at picking teams and founders and stuff, it's so true. Like, because there's so many, and in reverse, there are so many really talented people that I met, like genuinely, and this is like not a fake humble brag, genuinely much smarter, better at execution than I am, who have also not succeeded. So it's kind of like, it is a bit of magic still, I think.
Yeah.
As to, what succeeds one. But I think you are right. I think it is about like the team, and particularly, the founding team that is going to make the big difference.
Well, because it's their ability to solve the problems. And so I could look at it and go, oh, that looks like a really big problem that I don't think that particular issue could be a deal breaker. Like I can't see how they overcome that flaw. Yeah. But when someone's living and breathing it and they've thrown their entire life into it, actually you can't underestimate how powerful that is as a motivator to actually solve the problem and create things that you might have thought, from as an outsider looking in, seems impossible or too hard, but actually to them it's everything. And so that's I just found that whole process quite interesting from looking at start up to where Airtasker got to so far. That was just one really.
I think you're right about the incentives and the motivation too. One of the things about our journey anyway was that we kind of like raised money early, and that created the genuine pressure to be like, we can't get back out of this.
Yeah.
Because
whereas if
it was just our own money, we would have been like, this is too hard.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. No, I understand the logic there, because that becomes really powerful, right?
Yeah. So it's a genuine motivator.
And I think I'll let you go in a second, but I think it's really interesting that you guys have listed. Is that from a strategic point of view, that's got to be a great thing from a capital markets access to expand and take over other businesses and that sort of stuff. And I know you've done that a little bit, but that's got to be a huge plus to grow.
We were like, one, it builds consumer trust. Like we're a trusted consumer brand, and I think people do trust us more because they know that we've been through the rigor of our privacy policy actually gets scrutinized. Like our IT processes get scrutinized, and that's good for a marketplace. And the second thing is, as we're expanding into the US and the UK, we will likely need more capital to do those things. Not to Airtasker Australia is profitable, but to keep growing and expanding into new countries. And so, yeah, that was really the reason why we wanted to.
I think that's really smart, and I think that's exciting because it just lets you, if you see something, you can basically go to market and go, let's buy this business, or however you want to sort of structure it. But I think that's incredibly important, especially for international expansion. That's good.
Totally.
All
Awesome.
right.
Well, Dion, thanks so much for having me, man.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, so we actually made the marketplace or the proposition so awesome to the taskers that we didn't really have to actually focus that much on the supply side of the marketplace. And what I mean by that is like, and we didn't strategically figure this out, but it turned out this way. It was that basically, if you think about the way most people find new opportunity now, they actually have to pay upfront and take on all the risk of that opportunity actually turning into any revenue for their business. So if you think about like how Google Ads works, it's like you pay us $5 a click, and if any of that turns into business for you, good on you. And so it's kind of like build website, spend $5,000 or whatever, you know, doing all that, spend $1,000 on Google Ads, and that's kind of the proposition. Or if you're like Yellow Pages or High Pages on, it's like pay a membership fee and you take all the risk. And what we realized with Airtasker is that it was basically like, you come on to Airtasker, you get everything for free, all the job opportunities are there. If you win a job, we'll take a cut from you. If you don't win a job, no skin off your back. And so that made the supply side really amazing. And so all we had to do was really focus on the consumer side, which is like telling people about the fact that Airtasker is a place for all these jobs that don't fit anywhere else, and you can use us for that. And so, yeah, it was really about, because if you can get that demand, the supply would come, and then the supply gets more sticky as more demand comes in. So although it was a two-sided problem, it was predominantly a one-sided problem.
Yeah, interesting.
I'll share you a blog article I actually wrote on this, because we get asked that, and actually with Yaniv, I remember like riffing on a lot of this stuff. So that's the article. Awesome, man. Cool. Thanks a lot, guys, and Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Tim. Merry Christmas, and we'll publish this in the new year sometime, and in early January sometime. But I'll let Marcel email you and just let you know when it's out.
Thanks so much, and Marcel, say hi to Yaniv for me. Okay, see you later, guys.
Thanks, Tim. See you, mate.
Bye. Bye.